first keynote is by Vinitha Sunodh from cAPGEMINI. She's the Senior Director at cAPGEMINI and a very passionate leader. And in the brief introductory call that I've had with her, I realized her point of view was of very good relevance and very much in alignment with our team. The question she's trying to answer and the question that she's trying to present about is on how do we focus on continuous testing at an enterprise scale. As part of the cAPGEMINI team, she was also involved with a lot of activities involving robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, and continuous testing. And she has been able to resolve some of these problems in direct customer situations. We are really glad to have her here, and I would like to welcome Vinitha on stage and ask her to lead the way for the first session of the conference. So Vinitha, over to you.
Pradeep, I hope I am audible to all. So very warm good morning to all of you from the audience across the globe. It is a pleasure to be part of the STC event. As I say, it's that time of the year where you look forward for this event each year, bringing in the wonderful work as well as the innovations, implementations, papers that has been happening across the practitioners. So as Pradeep mentioned, right, continuous testing, how are we implementing it? And we have been doing this for long. And that is where I want to leave by in the end of 30 minutes, a thought as to what would be the 4 success factors to make sure our continuous testing is consistent and at scale. So not taking too much time, I would like to start with understanding towards continuous testing, right? We all know what it is. We have been doing and talking about it for a decade. I want to move your focus to the left side, where Capgemini's World Quality Report as of 2021, which was interviewed across 1750 countries with a lot of global leaders, what they think, is the priority for them from the QA team. So one of it from the IT side, they mentioned that they want quality to be enabled and it should have a good coverage. Similarly, the business says they want digital happiness, which is end user satisfaction. You go to a shop, you feel happy. Similarly, you're using an app, you want to have the digital happiness. What I think is continuous testing all about, I just categorize it into 5 C's, which is the biggest C is the customer. And the next 4 C's is how can you make it continuous? It should be constant. It should be customized. That it should be customized for the end user experience, and it has to be cross-channel. You cannot say that it works well on web, it works on mobile. There are so many platforms we work across. And that is where I think the focus should be. From my experience, I would bring forward that how can you have the 4 C's working together to achieve the biggest C of customer satisfaction? It becomes challenging. And I have put some challenges which we all face each day as we come across any testing strategy. First and foremost, which comes to my mind was right skills for implementing the continuous testing strategy. We have so many different types of testing today in terms of migration, data-driven, cloud, containerization. How do you make sure that you have the right skill to identify which strategy is going to give you the expected result? Next is maintaining of your relevant test suite. Can you make sure that your coverage, your impact is adequate? Is this the amount of testing that I need to do? So that's my second most thought that comes to my mind. Next is, how do we make sure we achieve in sprint testing? I do have a very good example which I can cover in the relevant slide as to why I say in sprint testing has been a challenge. Maintenance of the automated tool chain. Are we regularly maintaining it to keep it up to date to what we expect? Next, the biggest one, accessing the test environment and test data on demand. Are we there yet where we can just click and say that I want to scale my environment because I need to test a production defect and rest all should wait? That's not happening in some of the cases. How do you assess the performance of the system when you have a lot of load coming in? Are you doing a proper shift left there? Next one, how with all the continuous pipeline, when are you going to do a non-functional testing when you want to go into a cycle of build, deploy, build, deploy? And last and foremost, how are you going to get a visibility throughout the delivery cycle? Uh, these are some of the key challenges that comes to my mind when I was thinking, while implementing a continuous testing at scale, what are the challenges that practically I have been facing? And that is where, how do I make sure that I might not be able to resolve each of them, but how do I categorize them to make sure I have the best, is what I want to show to this audience today. The first one is shift left. I think we have all been doing a lot of shift left. We have been talking about shift left from long time. And the struggle that I went through for one of my programs was in sprint testing. Uh, it sounds that why in sprint testing we always do, but then do we really do in the spirit that we are doing as development comes in? Do we have everything that we need from an application perspective? Are we actually doing in sprint in the name wherein, last 3 days I am just doing my in sprint? So those were some of the things that I struggled when we were trying to implement for a major client. What we did is, how can you make sure in sprint or shift left is not just doing in sprint testing, but shifting left by 2 blocks. You start doing by building quality from planning to production. One, we are no longer called as the testers, but we are the modern engineers or STETs. We are involved in the BDD and the TDD frameworks, but there's something which really I like is the feature team concept. Everything is a feature. You get happiness when you use a feature. Can we create feature teams in the shift left by creating a BAQA model? And that is where the feature team worked well for one of my API programs, where the BA and QA created a feature team model that clearly gave an impact based view as to, for every feature, what is the relationship to other features, or what are the relationship that needs to be tested. Performance engineering. How can we bring in the performance engineering aspect at each of our UI, presentation, service, and integration layers? What are those key elements that we need to talk during the performance engineering, which can be actually embedded in our QA of Insprint? And certainly, a lot of the automation, the AI, the papers that I see, all these enablers, can that be added as macro tasks when we do our shift left? So that, in my mind, is getting the true shift left, which not only is in sprint testing, but also all of these activities which will enable us to achieve our end goal of coverage and quality. Next is orchestration. Like a symphony program, the quality is today orchestrating things end to end. We talk to BAs, we talk to developers, we talk to business, we talk to production people. So we are the orchestrators who bring it together end to end. And that is where 4 points that comes to me, and we have implemented this successfully in one of the programs, is one, yes, we automate throughout the tool chain. Two, I need to see a complete audit trail from BDD to unit testing to the security scans to the automation that is happening to UATs and the production defect leakages across till I deploy. Can I see a real time dashboard across the release pipeline which shows what happens at each stage? And trust me, we did this for one of our programs where we also gave access to the business. And the UAT was so simple because they knew what we were covering. We had a coverage matrix, we had a real time dashboard showcasing at every stage where we are, and a lot of inputs came in. So we were actually working so closely with the business. My third success pillar or the lever that I call is supporting the shared services. As I started talking, right, do you have an environment which is always available? One of the things that we always hear is this works in test, it does not work in production. There is a different flavor of data that has come in. So, shared services has become very key in our continuous pipeline. And what do you mean by shared services? Is a team, a horizontal team, who is very much part of our pipeline. They help us bridge the gaps that is not making sure, that is giving us the flexibility to do end to end. A very interesting example that I came across recently was for exposing an API, wherein you want to have a turnaround time of 3 weeks. You have 25 upstream and downstream connecting applications. Are we going to wait for all these 25 to be ready, or can we do during our shift left an impact analysis as to which are really impacting my API or my feature and which is just a touch and go? The ones which are touch and go can actually be given to the shared services team to keep it ready during my in-sprint testing so that I don't have to wait till that application is ready. And similarly, wherein we have an impact, we inform them early. So all of these pillars that I'm talking about, or my levers, they are all connected. You do that during impact analysis and give it to this shared services team, who will be ready with that virtual environment, ready for your execution. And similarly with data, the best part is if you can have a dynamic test data generated from production. It's not possible always. So how can you integrate your data into the pipeline? Can you create a synthetic data, age data, time-based data, migrated data? So all these flavors of data, when you do your shift left in your VAQA model, is where you can already identify and inform the shared services team that please keep this ready because I want it during my in-sprint testing. And the last lever is shift right. This is one of my favorites today because this actually helps you to do testing before. We have always been the last of the chain, but now we are moving towards the front. One of the things is testing in production, which it's been happening. Friendly user testing, chaos engineering, which is very popular with Netflix starting that, how they are doing chaos engineering. How can you use, if you have an existing product, how can you use the data in production, the analytics, to determine whether your test coverage is adequate? We did a survey of the number of flows that were clicked by a user to make sure that our coverage matrix priority was based on the user flows. That makes sure that your highest hit journeys are always running. That's how you use the optimized test coverage. The last one is acceptance test driven development. This is what I meant by being my favorite. This involves creating tests before you code, which essentially has been in one of the program implemented very well. You talk to the business, you talk to the BA and the testers, they come out how the software should behave. So your tests are ready while you send it to the development, that this is the expectation of the end user for how the software should behave. And that is where you go in a circle of customer business expectation, which is aligned to what the customer expects. give it to the BA and the testers, they define how it should behave, and then we go to the development and come back. So this is a new thing which I have liked it in one of my implementation as to how you do an acceptance test driven development. So just to summarize, the four levers that we talked, they are the base for your continuous testing pipeline. Implementing and deciding how each of these levers can work together to make sure that your pipeline gives you the adequate coverage, scale, and speed is what, as practitioners, we look for. And that comes to my next one as to how are you measuring the effectiveness of each of these levers. Certainly, we have our quality manifesto guidelines of IT KPIs, which as you go into the agile mode has the velocity, the defects across pipeline, your coverage across the requirements and the code, the scans, percentage of automation and testing types. You have API, you have migration, you have infra as a code, you have database checks. So all that covers in your KPIs. One thing which is coming into the pipe as we go with many pipelines that are getting implemented is continuous checks. Number of active pipelines. If time permits, I do want to stop for a case study where as everyone is creating their own pipelines, there's a technical debt being created of pipelines. I mean, a couple of years back, we used to say that everyone just creates an API or a microservices and exposes it. And at the end, you have like 10,000 APIs that you're sitting with. Similarly, as we move into the continuous mode, you are seeing lot of pipelines in an entire portfolio. How many of them are really active and being used? Are they getting triggered? Are they one time? What are the flavors? So we have actually created a real-time dashboard of this pipeline to see what are the flavors of pipeline, whether they're getting triggered, have we integrated it, are we running anything outside the pipeline. So these are some of the which needs to be added to our usual KPIs of IT and business, which is the DevOps pipeline KPIs, which that is what we call them, and it's being implemented today. And finally, the business part. One of as the 5 C's, the customer part, wherein faster time to market, the defect leakage in production. You can have predictable releases because if you are following a feature-based model, you know that so many features can be ready by a certain amount of time. And you can have an entire year of features jotted for you. And lastly, the application usage and the user feedback, which is important in one way. In one of my programs, how we used it is we used a survey to see how the users are using it. Take that data. What are the data flavors that they're using it? Take it back, feed it. The output-based testing, where based on the outcome or the output, the test packs are getting enhanced, they are getting maintained, and that in turn makes sure that you are relevant to what your customer expects. I do want to summarize at the end before I just stop for a case study. For me, always continuous testing has been, it's like a funnel. What you feed in is what you get, and that is the bugle that comes out. You have the shift left and shift right relevant to your program. How are you using it? Whether you are, what shift left focus areas you want to keep on. Do you need the shift right? If you are an existing product, can we use that? The orchestration, how like a symphony we are orchestrating across each of them to make sure that each of the element of the entire ship is ready. What is the focus of types of testing? Maybe each time you don't have to do everything. You have to determine that your strategy allows you to compartmentalize your testing to make sure that you know which type is relevant for a particular release. And shared services, they are waiting for you to tell, for the orchestrator to tell, for the shift left team to tell what is needed and how we can let them know, get them integrated into the pipeline. If we do our left right, our right becomes in the way we want it. And that is where the outcome or the output that we expect is coverage optimization. We want to make sure we have good coverage with a faster time to market. Scale, speed. This is something which is the need of the hour. And third, and the most important, is the customer satisfaction. With this, I want to close what I wanted to convey. But at the same time, I will take a minute to talk about one of the case studies which was implemented a couple of months back. You come across the scenario where the technology stack is diverse and you have a lot of fragmented pipelines. This is something very relevant because everybody says that I am using DevOps, I have DevSecOps, I've integrated my scripts into the pipeline. Whether all the pipelines at an enterprise level, are they following the same standard? Automation execution is happening, but is it happening in isolation, or can we reuse the best practices? And the tracking and centralization was missing. In our assessment, we found that the pipelines have gone to a humongous number of 4,000. And how can we see that in an enterprise, there are 4 to 5K pipelines that are running today? And do you have relevance for it? So we implemented an AI utility, which actually goes in the backend to determine from the logs what kind of pipeline is getting run. What is the nature of that pipeline? Is it just a Jenkins pipeline sitting there, or it is integrated to something? So all that utility, the bot of the AI did that analysis. How much of your QA is integrated into pipeline? How much of your virtualized services are integrated into the pipeline? Do you have all your shift left elements of in-sprint, unit tests, code scans, security scans integrated into the pipeline? Lot of assessment had these findings. It was in a it was in the category of the levers that we just spoke about, how your shift left is implemented, whether your performance engineering measures are implemented. All that, whether it is linked to the pipeline, was assessed as part of this assessment. And what we came up with, a standardized solution. Technical debt of the pipelines was reduced to 1K. At an enterprise level, they were grouped under technology. They were grouped under flavors of automation tools. The standard measures as to how a pipeline should be implemented was defined, working together. And I hope everyone can still see. The standard measures were defined. And based on that, we identified champions across programs for making sure that these DevOps champions were actually continuously tracking that we don't come into a technical debt of pipelines again. Automation was triggered into all the pipelines and making sure that it was integrated, and certainly the benefits were expected. So stopping here with this small use case, I thank once again the STC team and the entire audience for having me here this morning. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, Vinitha. Yeah, absolutely, Vinitha. That was a fantastic talk. And I think those four levers are extremely helpful in terms of starting a discussion. And most importantly, we have a very interesting question from one of the participants who says, what's the definition of a business KPI? Because it certainly sounds to be a very generic term. And how does someone really create a business KPI and implement a business KPI? So any thoughts on that, from your side, Vinitha?
Yes, I would give an example of how we have implemented for one of our programs, right? We call it the quality manifesto or the quality Bible, wherein you measure your effectiveness and efficiency of the continuous testing by focusing on what the IT wants and what the business wants. And that is the definition for business KPIs. Because you talk to your business, you would want that whatever I feel or I have should be implemented in a particular release. It should be at a certain quality. It should be delivered in that release completely and not switched off. And there should not be any defects associated to that feature that makes me switch off that feature. So how do you measure this effectiveness and efficiency is distributed between the IT KPI and business KPI. And essentially, business KPI is what the business wants. What is your business stakeholders? For them, what is their success factors is a one-liner definition to what the business KPIs are. And you can define them talking to your business stakeholders. Like for one of my business person, the success factor was every feature to be implemented within 4 weeks by the time they are completing the requirements and freezing it out. So that's a KPI. That's a business KPI because the business has promised to someone in marketing that this feature will be out within 4 weeks. So you define your effectiveness by distributing or efficiency between the effectiveness measure and the efficiency measure, and that is how the KPIs come in.
Perfect. No, no, I think it's a very wonderful start for the session, and for the whole conference. And I think those four levers will continue to haunt us the next 2 days. And we certainly will bother you with a lot more questions which are coming in from the members as well. And the question that I had with you, is, are these levers, which you have identified, from your experience, which one of the levers would you call as the most critical lever? In the sense, it's just like in a car, right? There are all of the important things, but there is one thing like a brake that's the most essential and life-saving one. So what lever would you recommend, that we start with? Is there any order an organization should focus on in these levers? Because all at a time also makes it tough for a lot of organizations. Your thoughts
Correct.
there, Vinitha?
Yes, yes. From my experience, I feel the test orchestration lever is the key. I imagine it as a cockpit. I mean, in a flight or a ship or anything, like the driver or the cockpit is key to make sure that you start and reach your destination on time. And the test orchestration is your cockpit, wherein the test practitioners, the managers, the SMEs, the consultants, they are the cockpit layer. They talk to everyone, tell them that this is the right shift or recommend a right shift left strategy. So and this test orchestration or cockpit is not just one individual. It's like a technical lead, an automation architect, a business or a product owner. They jointly form this cockpit team, and they go shift left, they go shift right. They make sure that all the elements of the levers talk to the other tasks or the other activities in the continuous cycle to make sure the orchestration is fine. I mean, all your parts are going well. And for me, test orchestration is relevant to a cockpit of an engine where,
Okay.
the cockpit makes sure that start to end happens on time. And we do it, without saying sorry, we are late, or or we set a
Okay.
precedence that we are always on time.
Perfect. No, no, and now that brings me to another question here. So if, let's say, assume for a moment test orchestration is the critical lever that we need to focus on. Now, in your experience and in your view of Capgemini, if I may say so, what would be the level of maturity that you see? If I were to put it on a scale of 1 to 5, where do you see test orchestration today? Is it 1 being the low, or is it very mature and should we move on to the next lever? What's your thought there?
No, I think test orchestration being at the level of 5 is like a biggest wish list, which is what
Okay.
I would say. But we
Okay.
are somewhere in middle. We
Okay.
have been talking of continuous testing or the DevSecOps integration into pipelines for a decade. And all of us at an enterprise level have put in some effort. Maybe not all elements of the levers are integrated like we want to make it at the 5, where on a click we are able to see everything. Yes, we are seeing parts of it, and that's where we are at 3. But it is possible to make it to 5, by
Okay.
implementing some of these things, as we move on to the pandemic has taught us that everything is possible digitally. I mean, we are having
Mhm.
such a wonderful event talking to the audience across. It's not impossible. We can achieve, and the three can go to five and come back to three as we move on to new things. So
Mhm.
I think all of us should be somewhere in middle. And
Mhm.
at least I've
Perfect.
seen in my experience, we have reached three, and we are making an attempt to reach to five, which is possible and doable.
Perfect. No, with that note, and I think orchestration is a good cue for me, because we are just 2 minutes before your time, which is exactly fantastic. So, true to the spirit of orchestration, I think really thanks a lot, Vinitha, for joining in, and really appreciate you taking time out, to open the entire conference for us and setting the direction and the vision for us to think about over the next 2 days. And my real thank you. You certainly can, stay backstage or attend the rest of the conference, for some of the interesting topics. Really appreciate, Vinitha. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you, Pradeep, and the STC team. Thank you for having me here. Thank you very much.
absolutely. Absolutely a pleasure.